Hello and welcome to this session on top tips for the virtual professional review interview. My name is Lara Mallett. I'm a business development manager and I'm part of a national and international team. So just moving slides, here I am. So I'm based in Cambridge and normally I cover the East of England and East Midlands, but as a team we are now operating as one and we're doing these events for people not only in the UK but internationally. And my role is very much about helping and guiding people, individuals and organisations around career development and professional registration. I have the agenda today. So I'm joined by James McCaskey, who recently became a professionally registered engineer. So congratulations, James. I'm going to be inviting James for his views and tips throughout the presentation, just to give you an insight how it was for him. So James is going to do a brief introduction soon. Then what I'm going to be looking at is the arrangements for the professional review interview. What is the professional review interview? Look a little bit about the format, what you'll be assessed on. I will then cover the competence scoring, top tips, outcomes of the professional review interview, and then there's an opportunity for questions. So James, if I can just hand over to you and you could give me just a brief introduction about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi all. So I graduated from the University of Exeter in 2016 with a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and I joined Baker Perkins, who are a company that design and manufacture food processing equipment, straight after graduating. And then I did that 2-year grad scheme where I was working in various different sectors, and became a mechanical engineer in September 2018. And then I did another two or so years and decided I wanted to change and started working for PA Consulting, a company near Cambridge, and I'm still there now. And whilst here, I've worked on quite a variety of projects which I've enjoyed. And then I've sort of been, throughout that time, I've been sort of looking to become a chartered engineer. And finally managed to get my interview booked and in November, and heard back after about 2 weeks, and I was successful. So yeah, that's my brief background.
Brilliant, thank you, and congratulations, James. It's really, it's a good achievement, you've done it, and it was really good to hear that you were successful in quite a short time period. So what I'll do is I'll go through the presentation and then I'll invite James, what is his views on various aspects of it. So first of all, the virtual professional review interview and the arrangements. So as you can see, it's all online now. So since lockdown, since COVID, we're now doing this through MS Teams, and we're going to continue to do this for the foreseeable future. It lasts about 45 minutes and we have a pretty high success rate because there's been quite a lot of checks before you get to interview. So that's a 90% success rate, which is great news. So how does it work? Well, you will book your interview date and time with membership. So they don't say, right, this is the date you've got to have. They will give you a selection of dates. And then it's conducted on MS Teams, so it's a 4-way video conference. 4 ways because there's you've got 2 assessors, and what's called an interview facilitator, and I'll explain about those roles. If you wish to use any additional documentation to support your discussions at interview, then you need to submit that at least 7 days in advance of the interview date. Up be touching upon that later, but James, did you submit anything? Did you in the end use any sort of evidence?
I had it up on my computer, but I didn't actually use it because I just didn't really need to. I mean, I could have sort of touched on it, but engineering drawings and things like that, it's more of just proving that I had done it, and I didn't feel I needed to. So
brilliant. So it's there if you want to, but in your case, actually, it was fine just for the discussion. Cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So you will then be sent a meeting request for the date and the time of the professional interview, and that will also include the link to join. And then you must have either, of course, a laptop, an iPad, or a desktop computer, and also the Microsoft Teams application for the test and the professional review interview. So just checking to make sure it works. Most people use MS Teams. If you haven't, then the membership team are there to support and help you through it. And then on the day, you've got to produce ID, so like something that shows your date of birth and a photo. So James, did you do passport, driving license?
I just had my driving license. Yeah, so that was fine.
So it's fine, pretty straightforward, just to show evidence of who you are. And then if you've got any concerns about what you need to discuss, and we say, check with a chartered engineer in your organisation. And I think that's quite interesting for you, James, because you work for a consultancy. So do you think there was any hindrance there because, you've got your client confidentiality? Was that an issue?
Not really, no. I managed to sort of be agnostic, or whatever the correct word is, about all the projects I was working on. You can get around it quite easily, I think. And they're not really interested in who you were working for and the exact specifics of what it was. It's more of the specifics of subject matter, I think. So yeah, it was fine.
Brilliant, yeah. And then, of course, if the picture freezes, depends what your internet's like. I've done quite a few webinars where people have dropped out. It's not going to affect the outcome. And, just have a pause, calmly, think about it, and we'll get in contact with you. It happens. It doesn't affect the result. And if you wish to interrupt a discussion or have a question, that's absolutely fine. Just raise your hand, and you can use the headset, whatever's going to work best for you for that audio connection. And then this is interesting. Choose your clothing that you normally wear to a business meeting, and ensure that you have water to drink. So James, I hope you don't mind me asking, what did you wear?
I was just wearing, so normally to work I wear sort of suit, trousers and a shirt, but I was at home, so I was in my room, so I think I was wearing a suit shirt, a smart sort of formal work shirt, and then just sort of tracky bottoms or something, because I was just in my room and it felt a bit silly getting fully dressed up. So
yeah, great. I mean, that's what most people do, sort of just look smart, but yeah, it's very few people wear ties anymore. I don't really see that anymore. And then also just sort of housekeeping, turn off your notifications. Doesn't matter if it happens, just to help with your concentration. So phones, emails and texts. I mean I'm terrible for that, but it doesn't matter, but it's just really to help you. Then moving on. Just hoping my slide deck is working. This is, you see, where it's live. Oh, there we go, it's moved on. So what is the professional review interview? So just a quick overview. It is mandatory, so everybody has to do it. That's part of our license with the Engineering Council. It is not an examination. It is not a question and answer, yes, no. You can't do a presentation, and it's not an ordeal. So I'm hoping, James, you can back me on this. It wasn't an ordeal. You didn't feel it was an interrogation?
No, not at all. I was slightly nervous before, as you are with sort of all interviews, but it was actually quite enjoyable, to be honest, just talking about the work I'd done and explaining it, and the panel were genuinely interested, so it was good. Brilliant.
And then just a bit more about it. So it's a real opportunity. It's like a business discussion with senior engineers, your peers. It's usually between 45 to 60 minutes. Most people say to me, James, it whizzes, is quite quick. Would you agree with that? Did it go pretty quickly?
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of non-stop talking for however long the interview is, so it does fly by.
Brilliant. And then the panel members are trained to assist the candidate to offer important relevant items. They are trained, and that's part of the criteria, they're trained. And I'll talk about the panel members just there to help you if you've got any issues. And usually they've reviewed the application a couple of weeks before interview, and they're looking at it, they're making notes, things they want to talk about. So things I often say is, if you've got anything in your application, we're using adjectives, I did an excellent presentation, then things like that, if I was an assessor, I'd like to say, well, can you expand on it? Why? Where was the evidence? So anyway, when you say you're good at something, and you've said it generically. Have you got the example to back you up? So I guess that was the whole point of your application, James. There's lots of examples to show you meet those competencies.
Exactly. Yes, I had yeah, as many as I could fit in, really, I suppose, or the right number of examples.
And that is a challenge. I'm sure all of you find it. Is the application you want to say lots of things, but you're limited, aren't you? And it's a real challenge.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things you can say, but it's about picking sort of the best fit, I think, and the one that sort of most sort of satisfies the particular competency. But
Yeah.
I did that in my preparation for the interview. So.
Brilliant. And all the questions are about relating to your application. So, they're looking at beforehand, and those are going to be the questions. So in terms of the format, you've got a chair who is generally a fellow but can be a member. You have a co-panelist, again, generally a member but can also be a fellow, and then an interview facilitator. And the interview facilitator is present to ensure that the interview is conducted with fairness and the IMechE requirements. They're also a member of the IMechE. They're a professionally registered engineer. And they're there to describe to you the format. So they do a bit of an opening, brief you, and remind you to use I's. And I'd say that's the biggest thing is I. Try and get into the habit, I did this. And if you say we at the interview, don't beat yourself up, but then just say, oh, and I was part of the team and my specific contribution was. So, James, did you have a bit of a brief with that interview facilitator? And how did you find the I's?
Yeah, so when you join the interview, you go into a sort of pre-room, like a breakout room sort of thing. You're there with the facilitator. He talks you through what's going to happen. It sort of calms you, well, not calms you down, but it sort of settles you down a little bit. He explains what's going to happen, and then in terms of using the I's instead of we's, he does, well, the guy I had, Mick, does drum that into you. So yeah, so that was fine. And
okay, yeah, and it's just not a style you'd ever use in at work, is it? You never put I in technical reports or anything. So it is a challenge. And only the chair and the co-panelists will be asking questions. The interview facilitator won't. And, commercial sensitivity or anything security sensitive is respected, but don't include it. As James said, they're interested in you. It's the engineering principles behind what you did, not the specifics of your company. And I've seen lots of people from the MOD, from very commercially sensitive, motor racing, a whole range, consultants, and they have successfully become registered and haven't had to give the exact detail of their project. And you'll be encouraged to give a brief intro to yourself. The assessors may also give a brief overview of their background. So it could be, tell me about yourself, tell me about your career, or tell me about your current role. So practice, don't go off a tangent, have a practice with that. Is that what happened to you, James? They asked you about your background?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, first bit of the interview, they sort of say, tell me a bit about yourself. Like in a normal interview, they sort of do that as well, I suppose. So yeah. I essentially said what I said at the start of this. I sort of finished, graduated university in 2016 and sort of went on from there, but kept it fairly brief because you've only got so much time.
And did you hear anything about the background in your case, about the interviewers, or did you get straight on to the interview?
Yes, they explained a bit about themselves as well in a similar way. I think they were both retired. One was from, I think, the nuclear industry, and the other one was from the automotive industry. So quite different backgrounds to myself. But yeah, so yeah, that's.
And was that a challenge, or do you think that didn't really didn't affect your interview, the fact they weren't from your industry?
I think that's probably a benefit from my point of view, because I was able to explain certain parts of technology that they just won't have touched on in their careers, because it's so industry specific in the food industry. So I think it's probably a benefit.
And also, people just to remember that our interviewers, they're members. We don't pay them to keep it objective, and they do it because they're interested in engineering. So I think that's kind of a plus, would you say, James? You know, they're interested in what you're doing. It's new and different, and that's why they became engineers.
Exactly, and they were interested in everything I had to say, and they were asking sort of quite. They had quite a lot of curiosity about what I was saying, asking like intelligent questions and technical questions and that kind of thing. And it was nice that they were, say, genuinely showing an interest.
Brilliant. Okay. So just moving on, so the content of the application form, as we've said, will form the basis for questions for this interview, and you'll be asked to talk around different aspects of your projects, your tasks, and assessors may use questions such as, you know, what did you find most challenging about your project? What did you find most rewarding and satisfying? And I think interesting, challenging, you can talk about the constraints. You know, there's a wide range of constraints, and they're the best examples, the ones that weren't straightforward. So, you know, what made it challenging was timescales changed, or maybe challenging because legislation came in, challenging because of budget, or maybe challenging because of COVID. You know, this is real life engineering. And were your examples like that, James? You know, how did you word it? Were they challenging, your ones?
Yeah, so I mean, I find the best thing to talk about are the challenges that you have encountered, and that's one thing I really like about engineering is the problem solving and things like that. So yeah, it was mostly about things that hadn't necessarily gone perfectly. Where there's a bit of a bump in the road, and then you yourself had to do something to resolve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would really say that to people is don't hide away from the challenges, explain it, because that's what's the sign of a professional engineer. And also just remember, this is a discussion between peers, so it's not like yes, no sort of format. And whilst you're expected to do most of the talking, you're not expected to do that presentation. It is a discussion. So the assessors may ask you to clarify or expand on certain aspects of your application. And this is when you might find it useful to show those sketches. But in your case, James, it was fine. You didn't need to do it. You know, you don't have to push it forward if you don't think it's appropriate. And I guess for you, it's nice to just have those as a backup, but weren't essential.
Yeah, exactly. If they asked a question that was directly related to one of the bits of evidence that I had, then I had the opportunity to bring it up. But the sort of opportunity didn't arise, and it, at the end of the day, didn't really affect me.
No, not at all. Great. So moving on. So just in terms of competence E, so let's spend a little while on that. So it says here you should have an understanding of the institution's code of conduct and awareness of how this relates to your everyday work. And you should also have an awareness of relevant legislation that you may be bound to at work, for example, health and safety, environment and considerations. And the assessors may also ask you about your commitment to the profession. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, James, did they ask you about the code of conduct, and what did they ask you?
They did indeed. They asked me to give them a sort of overview of the code of conduct and the Engineering Council statement of ethics, I think, or whatever it's called. And yeah.
And did they ask you to the example? Did you then have to give an example? Because I guess the example is quite easy if you've got written E1, E2, E3, E4, E5. If you just use one of those, did they ask you to expand on that?
So I think this competency I'd already sort of answered previously. So I did one quite long example. So I answered sort of more than one question with that, which was beneficial.
Great, and that satisfied them that you'd done that. Great. And it says here, just the last point I made about assessors may ask you about the commitment to profession. For me, that's kind of like it could be helping and guiding others. Was that expanded on? Because that's kind of really, I would say, E4 in your commitment to CPD. Did they ask you anything about that? What you'd done outside of work? Was that touched upon, or helping others?
Yeah, they did. I did a couple of things at Baker Perkins when we went out and did some sort of school outreach stuff and that kind of thing. So I think it's worthwhile having that in your locker, something along those lines.
Brilliant. And also I have to just say that James is my contact in his organisation and is kind of almost a conduit to help me support other engineers. So that's good if you've done that. And also just remember, the support that my team does isn't just for you, it's for anybody. You can be a member or a non-member. And then looking at the development action plan, so that is where you see your career going. It's part of the application. So they want to know that you kind of got a plan for CPD, continual professional development, in terms of your short, medium and long-term goals. So usually-ish, it's about 5 minutes on this, but they want to know where you want to be and what have you got to do to get there. So I'm going to ask you, did they touch upon this, James? And what kind of things did you write? Was it fairly generic or specific?
Yeah, I mean, one of the good things about this is I think most people have to do it in work anyway. You sort of have to have an action sort of development or CPD plan with your manager. So I just sort of went through that. I mean, I've got my short-term goals, which are sort of what projects I want to be on, what training I want to do, and then medium term is sort of thinking about what promotions maybe I want to do and what I want to specialise in maybe over the next few years, and then long term, what do I see myself doing? Do I want to be on the sort of more management side? Do I want it to be on the more technical side? That kind of thing. That's how I approached that section.
And it was fairly straightforward. You know, they didn't expand on this.
Very straightforward. So at the end of the day, it's about what you want to do. So it's not, there's no wrong answer in a way. It's just how you feel and what you want to do within your career.
Yeah. Good. And then at the end of the interview, you will be invited to add anything that wasn't covered. So they will ask you, is there any questions you've got? And sometimes the things I see is people say, well, God, they didn't really ask me very much on this specific competence. It's usually because they're satisfied that you've met it. But then that is your opportunity if you want to say, well, just in terms of competence, see, I'd like to add this, this and this. Or it could be a general question about the IMechE, but you don't have to. And it does not affect the outcome if you don't. So again, James, did you feel the need to ask any questions, or no, it was all kind of covered?
No, I don't think I asked any questions. One thing that we spoke about before my interview was that I mentioned the fact that I'd sort of set up this IMechE group at PA and was trying to sort of help the engineers that joined, if they wanted to become chartered, sort of put them in contact with Lara, give them a bit of advice about how to do their sort of logging of their day-to-day work and quarterly reports and yearly reports if they want to do them as well. So yeah, I think that's all I really added afterwards.
Brilliant. Okay, no, that's great. And like I said, we're really happy to help in your organisation wherever you are in the globe. So just a bit of an overview of what you're going to be assessed on. It's really the competencies. So it's your level of responsibility, your professional judgment, problem solving. So I think that was something you raised earlier, James, about why you want to be an engineer, you like being an engineer. It's about the problem solving. Your commitment to the profession. So James, you've done STEM stuff, and again, you've supported the engineers in your organisation. Your communication skills. So that is how you write the application, what you've written in Competence D, and also how you come across the interview. And what I'm going to mention here is one of my tips is make sure the interview is not the first time that you've spoken out aloud about examples. And it could be with a friend, it could be a colleague, a family member, or it could be on your own. Just make sure that you're happy to talk through them. And then it's also your commitment to continual professional development. And there are no trick questions. So hopefully, James, you felt that there weren't any trick questions?
No, none at all. None at all.
Pretty straightforward and covering all these aspects. One of the things interesting I do want to ask you about is about the communication skills. So a lot of people get terribly nervous about the interview. And I know you said there was a bit of nerves, and that's kind of only really natural. Did they put you at ease with that? How did that aspect happen at the interview?
So I think most of that was down to the facilitator in the sort of breakout room before the interview actually started. So he just sort of talks you through the process, which you already know, and he's saying just puts your mind at ease, really, that they're not there to give you a job. They're there to see if you're ready for something. So there's nothing, it's just one of those things, there's nothing really to be nervous about. And then as soon as I started sort of talking about my competencies and stuff, it was fine because I knew what I was talking about. I'd written the competency statement, so at the end of the day, you've done the work. So it's just trying to tell or describe and explain to others what you've done.
And did you practice beforehand? How did you, what was your prep?
Yeah, so the sort of week before my interview, maybe the weekend before, I'd looked through what I'd written in my competency statements just to refresh my memory, and then I had the morning off of the interview. I think I had my interviews about maybe 12 o'clock, 12:30. So I had the morning off, had a nice relaxed start to the day, went through all my statements again, and yeah, just got myself properly prepared and sort of in the zone.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I think that's good advice. So moving on, so it's all about you. So it's about your roles, your responsibilities, your experience and expertise. And remember, you've got that kind of opening roles and responsibilities, which is really useful for them because it gives a bit of background of who you are. Although, as James said, you would do that initial kind of opening. And then it's 45 to 60 minutes, and you're expected to do most of the talking. So how did you find it? Was it 60 minutes or was it about 45 minutes, James?
I think mine was more towards the 60-minute mark. I just have a lot to say for myself, apparently. Yeah, and it was fine. It was a lot of talking, and I was quite tired afterwards, but it was fine. No, it didn't bother me at any point, really. The one thing I would say is do have a glass of water there, because you will be talking a lot, and your throat will get dry. So,
good top tip. And then remember, you've got to give sufficient information about the scoring, which we'll go into. So it's 2 and 2 and 3 and 3, and we'll explain that a bit later. So the key thing is answer the questions that are asked. I've seen quite a few where people have been asked a question. I had one, it was about quality assurance, and the person then went and talked about their department who did that rather than what they did. So, you know, answer the questions asked. And a good thing if you're not doing it is they will be asking the same question in a different way. So if you notice that, then you're not giving the answer they want. And remember, they are looking for reasons to get you in, not to get you out. It's not like a job interview where there's only one position. They want everybody to get in if you meet the criteria. We've talked about the supporting evidence that you can do. My advice there is have a look on screen what that evidence looks like. So if you've got detailed technical drawings, they're not going to really look at it. Really detailed reports, not going to have a look at it. But what you need to do is have a look and see visually what that looks like, and calculations or graphs and trends, schematics, photos, models, anything that visually can back up your interview works well. So don't use too much, offer them but don't push it, and something that's manageable and accessible at the interview. And then it's up to you if you want to use aid memoirs, you know, what works best for you. So I'm quite visual, I like doing lots of sort of brainstorm and drawing, so I would maybe do that to give an overview of my competencies and sketches, anything that's going to help you. It's good to have a copy of the application form with you, maybe the code of conduct, IMechE, and then the Engineering Council Statement of Ethical Principles, because ethics is quite a big thing, so make sure you read that and you can't work to script. So, James, what did you have on your desk? You've talked about the water, that's really important, but what did you have in preparation when you did the interview?
So I had a copy of my competency statements that I'd submitted. I had the council ethical principles up on one of my screens. I had some of my, well, I do quite a lot of notes at work, so I had sort of some of my books open and sort of pages that I knew that I was going to need just to refresh my memory, and I'd done some bullet points as well of sort of key points to get out in each competency, and also figures as well. So it wasn't just sort of description. Sort of, I worked on things like I worked on a project that was worth X million or X £1,000, that kind of thing. So you actually get a sort of an idea of the value of things, and like other figures like stresses and things like that as well.
Really useful. So yeah, definitely provide what works for you, and for you that was good. Good to use another screen. So yeah, if you've got all the information all set up, brilliant. So just about the scoring. So UK spec, it's set by the Engineering Council, and it's in the 4th edition that we've got at the moment. And for chartered and incorporated engineer and EngTech, there are 5 competencies, and they all have the same weighting. So you've written your application form with your examples. A is about your technical knowledge and understanding. So that's about giving specific projects that you've worked on and showing the knowledge you had to gain and proved to us that you can understand it. B is the application. So really that's a good problem, good engineering problem where you're a problem solver. C is kind of organising, leadership management, so how you resource, how you plan it. It could be a bit about budgets, people, contingencies, leading people, all those examples in those subsections. And then D is communication, so that's evidence of your written and your verbal, but also a key thing for us is diversity and inclusion. So it's something that companies are doing more and more, and it's very topical. So make sure you've got a good example about diversity and inclusion. We've got some webinars about it, and they may specifically ask you, in terms of your communication, have you got an example where that has happened? And then E is your professional conduct. So we are looking for a statement in your application you've read, understood and abide by the IMechE Code of Conduct, Engineering Council Statement of Ethical Principles, and then those subsections. So all have the same weightings. Did you feel, James, they focused on one competence more than another, or actually it was difficult to say, it was more kind of a flow?
Yeah, it was more of a flow, I think. I can't really remember them focusing on one more than another.
Great. And then if we just go down, this is how the scoring is worked. So this is what the interview facilitator, assessors will be scoring you on. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Level 1 is aware. That is what we would expect from a graduate out of university, first, second year, not incompetent, spot on, but very much in a training phase. So there's lots of learning that they are doing. Level 2 is somebody you've now been given routine tasks, you're happy to do that. So performs activities in a range of contexts, supervision required for more complex ones, so things outside your remit. They would, you're looking for support advice, and maybe you're starting to get some responsibility of others or autonomy. And then level 3 is what we consider to be a skilled engineer. So now you've got examples of complex, non-standard projects. So those are projects that are development, an improvement, a modification. They are different. And you've got significant responsibility and autonomy, so you can show that you don't need to be closely supervised. You can show maybe there are aspects where you're overseeing the works of others. And then level 4 is what we consider to be a fellow. So that is very much working at a senior level, at a strategic level, and showing that you've got that expertise. So you perform activities in a wide range of complex and non-complex contexts, and you've got substantial personal autonomy and can develop others with the activity. So the way it works, interview, you've got 5 competencies, A, B, C, D, and E. You need to get 2 and 2 and 3 and 3. So it might be assessor 1 says, I think this person is level 2 in the first 2, 3 in the last. Other assessor might say, 3 in the first, 2 in the last. We don't mind which ones are your 2s and your 3s, but you can't be successful by, well, I've got a level 1 in this competence, but actually another one I've got a level 4. So that is the minimum, 2 and 2 and 3 and 3. And what assessors have said to me is try and aim for 3 across the board. And those that are your weaker ones, try and think, well, prepare how you're going to meet that. So for you, James, did you think any was weaker than the other? It sounds like it was very much a flow, so they weren't focusing on one particular competence.
No, I mean, the way I had to write my competency statements, so I think competence A, I had 1 example, but say then competence D, I actually had to talk about several different things. So I think I managed to sort of satisfy them all, but the way in which I did that was different.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So again, encourage you to have a look at these and, get your sponsors to have a look and see where they think you meet. But if you think you're slightly weak on one of the competencies, then that's one you should really be preparing in and how you can justify meeting that level. So just some tips to remember. So be confident. Remember, you're the expert in your career. It's all about you. Listen and answer the questions being asked. Don't go off a tangent. That first person, always use first person and focus on your individual contribution, what it was, and not what the team did. And don't beat yourself up if you say we, just go back to I was part of the team and my specific contribution was. Ensure you read your application before your interview and always go back through the examples you gave in the application, which is what James did. He had it prepared, he read through it, he had the morning off, but also had his application in front of him. And ask your mentor, sponsor or colleague, managers to read your application, ask you questions before attending. So it could be like a mock interview, or it could be just, well, here's my application. Ask me any questions, or I'll read through it with you, what I'm going to do generally, and if you've got any questions on it. How did your sponsors help you, James?
So, yeah, I've got two sponsors, obviously, but one at my previous work and one at my current work, so I spoke through it with him. We had a sort of mini mock interview and that kind of thing, and yeah, it was fine, really.
Straightforward, yeah. And think of the examples and how this relates to the competencies so you can be sure to demonstrate them. Actually, did you feel the need to bring in any other examples at the interview, or no, it was pretty good to use what you've done in your application?
No, I don't think I did. I think I expanded a bit on the examples I'd already given, because you've only got 600 words or so, but I stuck to what I'd already written down. Brilliant. And actually more than that, because I think I submitted my application in July maybe, and then I only had my interview in November. So there's obviously I've done work in the time in between, so I may have actually added a couple of bits as well. Which is absolutely fine.
And if we've actually got anybody here, I've had examples where people have put in their application and then changed jobs, and that's fine. Just tell them. Assessors, it's real life engineering, these are things that happen, that's fine. And you don't have to then necessarily bring in the new job, what you've written in, because you're focusing on what your previous job was. I always think this is funny. Remember to try and enjoy yourself, as this is an opportunity to meet with senior engineers. Oh, it's a bit cheesy, but it is. This is all about you. You should be proud of what you're doing. It might be a bit difficult, I guess, James, to do that with a bit of nerves at the interview.
Yeah, I mean, at the start I was a bit nervous, but like I say, I did actually end up quite enjoying it, because you just get to talk about what you've done and all the interesting things that you've done, and it's quite satisfying, really. Brilliant.
And finally, the assessors are looking for reasons for you to be elected. One thing I will mention is this is a collective who decide you are professionally registered. So it's a really rigorous process. You've got your two sponsors assessing you. When you submit your application to membership, what they're going to do is they're going to do the admin checks, make sure you've got everything. If you haven't, they'll contact you, and then we get a professional engineer to read your application, and then they recommend to membership you're ready for interview. You then have your interview, you've got those two assessors, you've got the interview facilitator, and then what I'll come on to is the professional review committee, and they're the last goalpost, just making sure they're satisfied with what the assessors said. So it is a collective who are deciding you at the appropriate level. So as I said, remember, it's all about you. I did, I led, I organised. Try and avoid statements like I liaised. What does that actually mean? You need to be waving at someone. I know that's a bit of a pedantic statement, but it could be, you know, I directed, I informed, I advised. Another one, I worked with. But we want to know actually the relationship you had with that person, or I was involved. Yes, but what was your specific contribution? So it's all about what you've done, where you've pushed the frontiers of knowledge, where you've introduced or worked with new technology, how you've saved money, have you worked with budgets and timescales, and how you're successful. And James, I always think that's funny about, well, budgets is interesting because it's the biggest budget is not always the best one to show you're a competent engineer, because a smaller budget is quite challenging. Did they ask you about budgets?
Yeah, we spoke about budgets and trying to make sure that we can actually achieve what we want to do in a project with the given money. So yeah, there was a discussion on that. And
you felt there wasn't, well, no trick questions, of course, but you felt quite happy with your answers.
Yeah, it was fine. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was fine.
Brilliant. Okay. So just in terms of the outcome, you don't hear on the day. It goes to, as we said, that professional review committee, again made up of members, a spectrum of our members who are just looking to see what the assessors have said. And then they just look at that and say, yeah, we're happy with that, we're satisfied. And then hopefully you are elected as a member of the IMechE, and then you'll be registered on the Engineering Council database as either incorporated chartered engineer. If the interview was not successful, you can reapply and there is feedback back. And I would encourage you to contact my team. So we're the business development team, and just have a chat with us. And you know what, you might think, I just had a bad day. And I want to reapply. They will give you guidance why you weren't successful. And often the reasons can be poor use of allocated time or inability to market yourself. It's that's often what happens. It's difficult to find out what you specifically did. That's examples I've seen, or poor use of examples. So again, it's not backing up what you did, and gaps in competencies. So sometimes it can be, we get graduates, 4, 5, 6 years experience, really good A and B, but maybe just need a bit more experience on their leadership, on their project management. So it does happen. Don't beat yourself up about it. Take it as an opportunity to review. What do you need to do? You can have a chat with the team. And you know, some people, it just nerves on the day and they want to have another go. So yeah, it happens, and just contact us for feedback. So I won't ask your input here, James, because it didn't happen to you. And then that's more or less where we are. So we've gone through overview, and what we're going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to look at the questions. So the questions that you've written in the chat to either myself or to James. So I'm just going to look. We have had some questions. I'm just going to see if I can see anything in the chat that has come up. So just bear with me. I know there were some questions, and I can't see them now. James, can you see the questions? The chat. Oops. Just had the chat there. I can't. I don't
think I can see any,
no, we did have some that appeared. So if you had a question, can you put it in the chat again so that we can have a look? Let's just go and see if I can see that. So I can't see any in the chat at the moment. Attendees, no, I'm just reviewing if we've got any. We did have some. Oh, here we go. I think this is to do with me and technology. So I can see some that have come up. Let's just have a look here. So what is the average career length for when engineers attend a professional review interview? Oh, that's a good question. I would say there isn't one. I do see quite a few people, such as James, where they are with James. How many years experience? You've got 7, 8, 7, 6? How many years experience?
No, it's 2016, so what? Yeah, 6.
6.
5.5, sorry, 5.5.
5.5. So we do see quite a few people at that stage, and because the minimum is, we say as a guide, it's just a guide, 4 years experience, and the idea is tick, you haven't met the competence once, you've done it several times. So we see quite a few people with that time, and people who've been on our Monitor Professional Development Scheme, so you see a group there, but then I see a lot of people with 10 years experience, 20, 30, 40. I have some people who apply a retirement, but the key thing I would say is have a look at the competencies, come to some of our other workshops, our other webinars to understand the competencies and see where you are. It's not a, right, I've hit 4 years, I need to apply. Have you got some good examples, and have you got more than one example? And if you're not sure, then it's about having a chat with our team. And you can book a one-to-one with us through bdm@imeche.org. So it varies, I would say. There's not a set amount. So I'm just seeing if there are any other questions we've got here. Oh, I've got quite a long question here. James said that he submitted an application in July but didn't interview until November. Is this a normal amount of time between both these activities? I expect a shorter gap. It varies. The shortest time is usually if you apply in September, and generally you can get an interview in November because that coincides with our end of year figures, so we want to put those in with the Engineering Council. It depends. So the factors that affect it is, can we get assessors? And remember, they have to be members, we don't pay them, and or if we have an influx of applicants. I would like to think that you put in your application form, it could be a couple of weeks, a month-ish, that you'll hear back from the membership team. If everything's straightforward, they then get the professional engineer to review it, and then they would give you some dates next coming months. So it really does depend on how many we get, and it is good that we're doing it online because that's really helping now. You don't have to be geographically bound, but my advice is put in your application form and email membership, so that's the team looking at membership@imeche.org, and ask them if they can give you some indication. So in all fairness, it can be longer, sometimes it can be shorter. Right, I'm just looking at other questions that we've got. The average career, here we go. Is there somewhere to download the application form to view in advance? Yes, so if you're doing the application form, the online version, you don't have to be a member, and you can come back and edit it back and forth. And it's the same, there is also where you can get the PDF. Easiest way to find it is just Google IMechE CEng or IMechE IEng. Go to that landing page, everything is on one page. Go to where it says contents and it says start your application, and that will take you to those different options, the online one or the PDF. What did you do, James? Did you do online or did you do the PDF?
I did. I can't remember now, actually. I think I wrote it in Word.
Yeah.
And then I think I inputted it online. Yeah, I did it online.
Yeah, yeah. So it's easy in Word, isn't it? And I'd agree with you. Do it in Word first. You can look at the word count. You can edit it. And did that help you doing it in Word, being able to do that?
Definitely. It's easy, and you can know that you've saved it somewhere, and it's not just going to disappear because of some internet problem. So yeah, do it all. Definitely do it all in Word, and then copy it across. Great.
Okay. Right. I'm just going to see if I've got some more questions here. So just bear with me as I go through them. Do you use examples outside of your form? I think we kind of covered that. You found, James, that you didn't have to use examples outside of your application form at interview, but there's nothing stopping you to do that. But I guess if you write a good application form, it's not necessary. Would you kind of agree with that, James?
Yeah, I pretty much stuck to my competencies and my statements. I didn't sort of read them out word for word, but I stuck to those examples. And like I say, in maybe one or two, there were examples that when I'd written the statements, I just hadn't done yet, and I added them.
Great. Okay, great. And I think there's another question. Is there a typical wait between submitting an application and being interviewed? I think that's kind of, we've kind of already answered that. It varies. It varies. If you have got everything in the application form they've asked for, they don't have to go back and check with you, then it should be fairly straightforward. But again, it really depends on access of the assessors and the number of applicants with that interview time. The other thing I would say is if you haven't visited it, we have a landing page, my team. It's imeche.org/workshops, and there gives you a range of different workshops. And we do an application workshop, and that we usually do maybe once or twice a week, and each month we do them in a different format. So one will be at lunchtime, UK time, one will be in the evening, that'll be in bite sizes at the weekend, and for our audience in Southeast Asia, we do that within that time zone. And I really think that's a good idea to attend one of those if you haven't, because it will really help you sort of give a good understanding of where you meet the competencies. James, did you attend an application workshop?
I did, and that's one thing I would say definitely do if you can. Definitely go to one of those application workshops. They're really good. The sort of first session was going through what you need to write in your application, and then you've got sort of overnight or however long to write all your statements. And then you have an hour session the next day going through what you've written, and then they just, well, I wouldn't say tear it apart, but they say what you've done wrong and what you've done right, and then you can rewrite it again, submit it again for a review, and then you're sorted pretty much.
Yeah, and we have quite a high success rate, people going through that, because again, it's understanding what the assessors want, what does the wording actually mean. So yeah, we encourage people to do that. So that's imeche.org/workshops, and you don't have to be a member to attend. Just another one about timescales, how long after the interview to receive a decision. Again, it varies. The Professional Review Committee meet about 4 times a year, but actually do quite a lot of virtual meetings as well. So again, it depends on the influx and numbers you have. If you don't hear back, then you can always email membership@imeche.org. You also have an opportunity to track your application, and you can have a look at that just to see where you are in the process. Now, I think that's about all the questions I've got. We're just checking. We've talked quite good questions here, a variety of questions. I think that's about everything we've covered. Just checking. We've got another one here. Just to let you know, someone talking about they've submitted their application. So they've got an interview, which is great. They submitted it at the beginning of January, actually. Now they've got an interview booked, which is fantastic. So there you go. That can be fairly quick. Someone's got to leave, never mind, we'll send this on. Is the scoring criteria done partly before the interview? For example, might you have already hit the required scores in 2 and 3 prior to the interview? That's a good question. So the assessors will be making notes and making a judgment of where they think you are in the competencies, but half of it is the interview. So the interview, they're just reaffirming it. So no, they won't make the decision finally, but I suspect they will have an idea where they think you meet, and it's just confirming at interview that you meet that area. How do you book the application workshops? We've already discussed that, so it's imeche.org/workshops. If you can't find it, email the team, BDM, that stands for Business Development Manager @imeche.org, to give you the range. And I think that's about all the questions we've got. So really, it's just concluding. Any last minute top tips, James, before we go?
No, I don't think. I think we've covered them all, to be honest. Yeah, nothing more from me.
Yeah, and it's same with me. My advice is just practice. Practice speaking out loud, and the thing that you did, James, was prepare. So I just want to say thank you so much, James, for taking part in this. I always think it's really useful to get an insight of somebody who's been through the process. Also, just I hope you've all found this useful. If you're going through an interview, from both of us, just the best of luck. I hope it all goes really well. And any further questions, then you've got that BDM@imeche.org. We will send you a copy of this presentation. So all the best of luck, and thank you for attending. Thank you.